Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. My name is Julia Dolan. I'm the Minor White Curator of Photography here at the Portland Art Museum. And I'm thrilled to have you join us for the second in a series of lectures that coordinate with the Contemporary Native Photographers and the Edward Curtis Legacy exhibition. And I'm going to perhaps need a little bit of tech help for 1 second, so I'm going to step aside just for a sec. Good. Thank you. I need all the help I can get sometimes. So I am showing you this image of our friend Zig Jackson, who is in the photograph and will be speaking to us in just a moment, because we had this really wonderful thing happen last night at the restaurant. A few friends of the museum and I went with Zig to Raven and Rose to have dinner. And John Goodwin, who is one of our trustees, was facing the window and my back was to the window. And one of our TriMet buses went by and stopped at the light. And John said, "Everybody look out the window, look out the window, look out the window." And this photograph on part of an ad, and it's part of an ad that we have, an ad series that we have for the exhibition, was on the side of the bus. And so it was this incredibly wonderful meta moment, because here's Zig Jackson in a photograph on a bus, and then he was also at the table. And it was great. And it was a very sad photography curator moment. I grabbed my iPhone, which was deep down in my purse, and I tried to take a photo of it, but then the light turned and it went on, so I missed it, so I couldn't show you in action. But that was a really special moment for me, because and hopefully for Zig, I'm not sure, but we're so thrilled to have this exhibition here and to be able to not only look deeply at Edward Curtis's work, but to think about the ways that work has functioned over the past century, and how contemporary Native artists are both reacting to it and also making their own work now that we should be seeing and we should be thinking about and should be enjoying. And we were just actually written up in the New York Times last week as one of the important exhibitions to see in the United States this spring. So go Portland Art Museum. But enough about us. Let's talk about Zig. It is my great pleasure to introduce Zig Jackson, who is professor of photography at the Savannah College of Art and Design. Mr. Jackson, who is of Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara descent, was raised on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota. He earned a bachelor's degree in education at Northeastern State University in Oklahoma and studied photography at the University of New Mexico. He earned an MFA in photography in 1994 from the San Francisco Art Institute and was the first Native American to receive the degree. And this is amazing to me as well. In late 2004, early 2005, when the Library of Congress acquired 12 of his prints, Mr. Jackson became the first Native American photographer to enter their collection. That was only 11 or so years ago. He is the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including the Wallace Alexander Gerbaud Foundation Grant for Excellence in the Photographic Arts, a National Millennium Survey Grant, and he was awarded the first Beaumont Newhall Award for Photographic Excellence from the New Mexico Humanities Council. His photographs serve as perfectly funny, yet perfectly challenging works that question Native American subjectivity and identity and provide critical conceptual underpinning to our own exhibition here. Please join me in welcoming Rising Buffalo, Mr. Zig Jackson. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Julia. And Dina Dart, too, I wanted to say thank you. So she was one of the Native American curators here. I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be shown here. It's a great, beautiful city. I sat out yesterday and I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. And then the guy came and said it's going to rain at 3 a.m. So, which is all right with me. I love rain anyway. So, I'm going to go ahead and I kind of chronologically put these in order from the beginning to where I'm at now in my career. So, and then after that, we'll add, I can answer questions if you have any questions. So, Rising Buffalo is my Native American name. I'm a Mandan, Hidatsa, and a Rickarai Indian from North Dakota. And this is my little journey of photographs. So, here's one of my early photographs. It is the sign on up in the Badlands. This is our reservation. Is it the lights go down any darker than that, Gurmo, or is that? Can you see it? Okay. You want it a little darker? We were raised in North Dakota, the Mandans, and in the 1830s, a boat came up the Missouri River, and it had a disease called the smallpox and wiped us out. When I researched the Mandans, there was, you read articles where 7 lived and 67 lived and 40 lived and so forth. And out of that, Zig came. So they put us with the Hidatsas and the Rickaras. And that's why we're called the 3 affiliated tribes. They flooded our lands in 1932, and they built a dam on the Missouri. Then they moved us up to higher ground where the wind blows. And it's in North Dakota, and there's no trees. I remember growing up in North Dakota and asking my father, I think the state tree is the telephone pole. So I asked my father, I said, where's all the telephone poles come from? And he said, trees. I said, where's all the trees come from? He said, they're out there. And so I grew up that way, knowing the telephone poles and trees and the plains. And they put us up on the plains where the water was brackish. And they put us way up in the Badland area. Let's put them way out there so we don't have to deal with them. So this is coming out of the Badlands, and I photographed that. Here's an early photograph of Zig. Look at those pants. Look how tight they are, huh? You can, I was telling my classes, I said, you can almost see my camel's foot. Or is it camel's toe? Which is it, camel's toe? I was raised by my father. Here he is. His name is Two Chiefs. His Indian name is Two Chiefs. And he makes war bonnets. And he has that medicine to do that. Not everybody can make that. And he does. And he's going to have a giveaway. So he has all of his things in the back of the pickup. And he's going to give away, out of 10 kids, I'm the only one that left. My 9 brothers and sisters still live in that 200-mile radius. And here, I remember when I was young, and I can hear my father coming, and he was a spree alcoholic. He'd get drunk maybe once every year or once, every 6 months, and he'll last like a week. And he'd come home, and every time he'd come home, he'd wake up the whole family, and he'd say, Ziggy, where's Ziggy? Get Ziggy up. And I'd have to go up and take his boots off. And he would say, I want you to leave. There's nothing here. I want you to go out and get an education. And I'd say, Dad, I don't want to leave. And he'd say, Nireta. He'd say, don't talk. And lo and behold, out of the 10 kids, I was the only one that left. I remember being younger also and walking on my mother's back, and she was weeping, and I said, what was wrong? And she said, of all my kids, you're going to be the only one to leave. And I said, no, I'm not going to leave. I'll be here forever. Well, lo and behold, I left. So this is an early photograph. I was going to school at Intermountain Indian School in Brigham City, Utah. I came home for the summer, and my father was having a giveaway. So he was real proud of me. So we put the teepee up, and we got all the war bonnets out, and my sisters cook, my mom cooks, all the aunts, his brothers get together and support him, and they have a giveaway. So Here's an early photograph. My father passed away in 82. And my mother passed away in 99. I was back home. I was studying photography at the University of New Mexico. And I put my camera on self-timer, and I said, Mom, I want to take a picture of you. And she said, wait. And she got in her trunks and pulled out all these blankets. And here's your old Hudson Bay, your satin star quilt, your Pendletons, and inside the trunk were these 2 war bonnets. And my brothers are here, and she's very proud of us. So, I was a weird kid. I was, I collected everything from projectile points, rocks, hides and stuff like that. And I always carried a camera. And I walked around and photographed. They're having a giveaway, and this little gal's having her giveaway. She has all those blankets. The singers here are being fed. They're having a giveaway over here, and she's giving away a war bonnet also. So, what's a giveaway? It's a honor thing for families. Usually it's given to people who have deaths in their families, and after a year of mourning, then they have a feast and a giveaway to honor somebody. It could be a veteran coming back from the service, and it's like a potlatch for the Northwest Coastal. But we don't give everything away. We give what we can away, and usually, ironically, it's blankets. So, meaning at one time they had smallpox in them. So, when you go to a reservation and someone gives you a blanket and puts it around you, that's quite an honor. These tribal women, they'll go ahead and make quilts all winter, and they'll have them ready when someone passes away and they're ready to go ahead and honor them. They'll go ahead and give their star quilts away and so forth. So here they're giving away. He came back from the service. His sisters are all here dressed, and it's quite an emotional moment to get dressed. And the speaker here has his little bundle back here. They give him blankets, and they have all their star quilts and Pendletons and so forth. I remember this photograph. I was young, and I walked up to these guys, and I asked them if I could take their photograph. And the older gentleman on the right said, "Hiritaba." He said, "Who is this?" And the young one over here, Matt, said, "Raymond Dancing Bull at the Gishtan City. Atu Shit." Said he's kind of the funny one. He takes pictures. And they didn't know I understood that. I can understand them talking, but I took this photograph. And recently, a couple of years ago, a guy came up to me and he said, I still see my grandfather and my dad. We have that photograph you had given us. It's still above the TV. So I knew exactly which one they were talking about. So Roseanne, Crow Flies High, early photograph. I said, "Roseanne, can I have this photograph?" And she's standing in front of this monument. It looks a little not sharp. Is it sharp, Grandma? This is kind of a recent one. This is my relative in Crow. She's a meth user. Oh, she was really a beautiful little girl coming out of high school, and that meth took her, and she has no teeth. And I took her photograph. For some of you that don't know, that this is a clothesline where you dry clothes. But this is where they were cooking meth. And she's in prison now. She broke her probation and quite a mess. So Bobo Dragswolf. Most of these people are passed away. I'd go to Indian reservations. Every summer I'd load my van up and live in my van and travel. When I was younger, they shipped me out to a place called St. Joseph's Indian School in Chamberlain, South Dakota. I did my my primary school there. Then I went on to St. Mary's in New England, another Catholic school. My first loves were nuns. So, and I went on to Intermountain Indian School. That's when I started learning about a lot of Native Americans. We went to school. I went to school with a lot of tribal people from Idaho, the Montana, the Blackfeet, Crow, Assiniboine, Sioux, Wyoming, a lot of Rappahoes, Shoshones. Idaho had Shoshone Bannocks, and Colville Indians went to school there, and Mission Indians from California. All the Pueblo tribes went to school there, including all the Diné kids that went to school there, the Navajo kids. And I would listen to all their stories. All my friends were from, homes just like mine. And we would always joke together. And after high school and graduating out of Utah, I went to school in Oklahoma. I wanted to be a football player. And Oklahoma was a place to do it. And I went to Bacone Junior College in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and I played junior college basketball. And he ran into the Creeks, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Seminoles, and Cherokee, the 5 civilized tribes. They had Comanche, Kiowas, Osages, Otos, Pawnees, and I would travel to every one of these areas, and I got friends there, and so forth. And I got my degree out of Northeastern Oklahoma State in Tahlequah, the Cherokee capital, in 82. Then went on to the University of New Mexico to work on a master's. But at the same time, I was an artist. I fell in love with the camera, and I started studying at the University of New Mexico. I didn't know at the time it was one of the best photo schools in the nation. They had people like Tom Burrow, Betty Hahn, Patrick Nagatani, Rod Lazorick, Meridel Rubenstein, who was teaching at that time at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I became her TA and taught briefly at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. Then I went on to the San Francisco Art Institute and got my MFA, where Ansel Adams started the program. I was Perkle Jones's last teaching assistant. Perkle Jones was Ansel Adams's last teaching assistant. And Hank Wessel was there, Linda Connor, and Jack Fulton. And it was something I fell in love with. Every summer, I'd load the van up and travel to all these Native American areas and photograph. It was something I knew. It was something I could think about. And I'd travel and take pictures. Sometimes I wouldn't even photograph. I'd just go out and visit and then continue on, sleep in the van, cook, photograph, and so forth. I dated women because of their cameras. I put my way through photo school dating women with good cameras. I know I can go down each body of work and tell you who I was dating at that time. So I remember I met Joan, who was from the Jersey Shore, and she had a Mamiya 645. It was a beautiful camera. And we broke up, and I ended up dating Jennifer, who had all the Nikon lenses. Oh, Nikon FGs, FM2s, wow. Then I went on to the Art Institute, and I met Jody Hasselblad, 500 CM. Oh my God, I miss him. Here's a photograph I took up north, traveling. It's up in Chippewa Cree. It's in Rocky Boys. And Sky Fox. Gertrude Foolish Bear. Her father was Matt Foolish Bear, and he was always good to me. He'd say, Zig, he'd say, I'm glad you're doing something out there. You're doing something good. You stay out there. And there's nothing here on a reservation. And he'd always encourage me, and he passed away, and Gertrude came up to me and she said, can you take this photograph? This is a year later. She's going to have a giveaway, and she's giving away her favorite horse. And probably to the senior pallbearer who put her father away. And so she's dressed, and she's going to give it away. So Here's a photograph. These are Shoshone Paiutes in Reno Sparks Colony in Reno, Nevada, where matrilineal, everything comes from the woman on the tribes. And it's going to be the women that are going to bring us through. And you look on the flags and they have the men. The men aren't as strong as I travel and see things. And I think, and casinos are coming in and so forth. I sat there and I saw this, and they were coming in out of the powwow grounds, and I photographed it. I thought it was one of my better photographs. Early work. Indian boy on roller skates. He doesn't have any pavement. Here's an early photograph I took at in New Mexico in Albuquerque. I tell my classes, just to be, when you photograph, you'll know what you're photographing. This is a grass dancer. This is a Sac and Fox, Southern Plains, and this guy's an Apache. Got 1 inch and make sure that everything's centered and photograph. So early works, I used to go ahead and over on the dark rooms and put each image in there. And I photographed an old Albert Bairstead painting of the last buffalo hunt. And then I photographed my brother in the Fox Society with his kids. And these are Indian government foods that are given to us. They were stored in warehouses in the Midwest because of nuclear attack during the Cold War, the government thinking Russia will attack, and these fallout shelters got tons and tons of this food. Well, what are you going to do with it? Well, let's give it to the Indians. So this is what we grew up with. And this is chicken, you can tell. This is pork. And this is chopped meat. It's like spam. You open it up, and a big chunk of white grease falls out. Oh, I miss it though. I miss it. And I photographed it. I want people to know what Native people in America grew up on. And this is my early works. I was showing that transition from where we used to hunt, our culture, and where it's at now. Sodium euthyrorbate, I wonder what tribal woman knows what that is. That's high in salt content. Our life expectancy is like not even over 70. I don't expect to live to be 75. I started to write on my photographs, put my photographs together, hand color, and get crazy with them. And this is when I was an intro kid. I took this photograph in Oklahoma. This is the Red Legging Society. I photographed a teepee. I collected all these Indian foods and found a rubber stamp of a buffalo and stamped them and hand colored. Wrote the story about my dad hunting all day and not getting anything. And when he came home, my mom had chopped meat. My dad used to be able to cook chopped meat like 11 different ways and make it taste really good. So I would listen to stories and write them down. And one particular story was a Mahubawiya, holy woman. And I did this piece. She's a beautiful woman and transforms herself. When you guys go out hiking in the mountains, you're going to see the ravens come, and they won't leave you alone, and they'll talk about you, and you talk back to them. And this story is that she's really beautiful, and she'll come at you as a raven, and sometimes she'll transform herself into a beautiful woman, and take you away, take your soul away. My dad used to say, if you see that guy on the street and he's down and out on his luck and he's lying there passed out, he said, Mahubawiya has his soul. But that's okay, he's going to come back. And she's got a beautiful voice. So I remember my mom was on her deathbed, and I wanted to show her some of my photographs, and I took these out. I thought I did. And she was going through them looking, and I was sitting there. And she said, Hiridaba. She said, what is this? And I got up, and it was this image. And you know, as a photographer, you don't want to show your mother nudes that you've done. And especially if she's a traditional tribal woman. And I said, that's Makabawea. And she stared at it for another 5 minutes. She goes, Guru Nagid's Makabawea. She said, yes, this is Makabawea. And she went on. So I knew I hit the nail on the head. So early works. This is Austin, 2 moons. Be stoic, don't laugh. Okay, Austin, you can laugh. Be stoic, don't laugh. Okay, you can laugh. You know, and it was kind of a takeoff of the turn of the century images were the Indians for the long exposures on the cameras. And well, mostly what Edward S. Curtis would do is the exposures would be too long and everybody would be stoic. And Hollywood would take that, and we all have to talk like this because this is what the camera did, made us stoic. And then you look at this piece, and he's got a beautiful smile. He's a Northern Cheyenne. He's from Busby, Montana, and Lame Deer, Montana. And he's got all these accolades, everything he has. He spoke at the United Nations for the clergy. He's a medicine man. His great-great-grandfather fought in a battle of Little Bighorn against Custer. He said he was a great man, and I would go up and visit him. So he's gone. And this is my family. This is my brother, my aunt, Joyce, my mom, and my sister. Joyce was a very beautiful woman. She lived away from the reservation. But she grew up with us, and she was fun to have around, and she always dressed as a man. She was a lesbian, and we all knew that as kids growing up, and we respected that. No one ever said anything. And when she came back to the reservation in her later years, she would dance in a grass dance costume with the men. And she would get in the contests and win. And everybody would just pack the powwow grounds just to see Joyce dance. And she was beautiful. So here she is. She's thin. 6 months after that, she passed away. She had cancer. Then my aunt passed. And all the stories come back. And then my mom passed. Now my sister has them. We keep them. They go, oh my gosh, you should write these stories down. And these young girls have them. They have them. They don't need to write them down. They'll remember them. And if they're gone, they're meant to be gone. That's okay. So, early works. These are my friends who are Jemez Indians. This is Joe Gutchapin and his boys. He's very proud of his boys. Yeah, here's a Kennedy poster. One time, Frank here worked for the Park Service in the Jemez Mountains in New Mexico. And I drove on by and I picked up old Joe Gutchapin, his father, and we went up to the Los Ojos bar. We got drunk. So I was with old man Joe, and I drove him home back to the Pueblo. And his old wife came out, and the old Pueblo lady started cussing him out. And I was trying to help him into the house. And I said, I'm sorry, I got your husband drunk. She said, come on in and eat before you drive home. And she fed me. But she was really good to me. So these guys have all passed. And these guys are like in their almost close to, mid-30s. So I would take over on these old enlargers at the University of New Mexico. I'd put this image in. I'd rephotograph these old images. People would save them for Zig. He'll come back. He'll take them. And this is what an old earth lodge looks like. And an old, teepee ceremony. She's standing inside the teepee. What does that mean? Zig? I think it means like she's available. If she stood outside the teepee, she's married. And these are the boarding school days, and the buffalo is in the back of the wire, and the sign comes into play, and here's my house in New Mexico. So I'm starting to put images together and starting to photograph things and get more political with my work. It was real funny getting back to Machabawea. I put it in an art show in San Francisco, and I didn't want it to sell. And the lady said, don't put $3,000 down on it. Nobody's going to buy it. Sure enough, it was the first piece that sold. It went to the Left Foundation. Here's an old image of boarding school days. This is my grandfather, Jackson. And I want to say this is Stevenson, but it might be, he's a Beeks. But my grandfather's name was Dancing Bull. And the government came in and said, you guys can't have those names. You guys got to have names like Jackson, Stevenson, Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson. You go to reservations, you'll see a lot of presidents' names. My brothers went ahead and changed their names back. I just kept Jackson. I thought it was just too much. This old photograph, I was showing that transition. This is Brother Paul. He taught us all how to be altar boys. This is my brother Royce. And this is Father Steve. And this is Brother Bonaventure. Brother Bonaventure taught us how to draw and sketch. And when you went to the boarding school in South Dakota, they deloused you. And I used to hate that. And I used to cry to my older brothers. I said, I don't want to get bug juice on you. What they had were these 5-gallon buckets. And they would paint you up with bug juice. And if you had it, you had to spend another night in the infirmary alone and then get painted again. And I would cry to my brother and say, I don't want lice. We don't have lice. I don't want to do this. He said, shut up. What's wrong with lice? There's nothing wrong with lice. It comes from the earth. Well, we never had lice, but the Sioux had lice. Oh, sorry, Sioux guys out there. Don't want to start an uprising. Start a big fight. So, the old Van Dyke process. Besides being a photographer, I was a painter before I was a photographer, and also a potter. I love to throw wheels on the pottery on the wheel and clay on the wheel. And I'd make these masks. You got high fire, and raku. And this is Mesa Verde. I was showing the sacredness of it. I'd photograph this, make a codolith of it, cut it out. I'd coat the paper. This is a 20 by 24 image. I'd make a codolith with that, coat the paper, put these on, put a glass on it, clamp it, take it outside, expose it to light, and bring it in and put it through the chemicals. I put 3 of these in a show at the, I was an undergraduate. I was working on a master's, but I went back into the arts in UNM, and I put them in a show, and I had to borrow money to get them framed, and I put them in old poster frames. I had to buy some backing for them, so I borrowed the money for it. And I didn't go to the opening, but the Monday came, and the guy who was put the show on was waiting for me, and he said, Zig, your work sold. And I said, wow, that's great. Where's the money? And he said, don't you care who bought them? And I said, who bought them? And he said, the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago. So, which is really good. So that was kind of a start. So, early works, I would take them to galleries around the Southwest, and nobody wanted to buy photography. and they all wanted sepia-toned images of the Native American. So what I did, I selectively toned them. I said, you want toned Indians? I'll give you toned Indians. So I would do that. Of course, nothing sold. So go around photographing groups, Fox Society, very sacred society. You can't take cameras in and take photographs, but as soon as I came out of the arena, I lined them up and said, come on, I'm taking your photograph. The peyote guys, peyote Native American church, they got their huge macaw feathers. They got macaw feathers, and you know they're what's the bird, the state bird of Oklahoma called? Sizzletail. The sizzletail feathers and the water birds. These guys are holy guys. Fox Society. This is Mr. Flea Market Man. I was walking at a flea market, and I see this notorious end of the trail statue. I said, James Earl Fraser did that. And then I see the metaphor for the fence, and I see the buffalo. And you know, you're brought up with your name, Gitapakirahish. And I remember my grandmother giving me that name when I was young. And my mother cooked, and my grandmother was a full-blooded Mandan. Her Indian name was Going Home House. And my brothers would be looking in the window, and she faced me to the east and the south and made me go a complete circle. And then she sang, and she said, your name is now Gitapakirahish, buffalo getting up in the grass. And you're brought up with that name, and your uncles hold your head, and you're a big kid. I'm the biggest in the family. And I come around, and I see this, and I photograph it. And that guy's yelling at me, saying, hey, that'd be $5 for that photograph, buddy. And I go up and I touch the buffalo, and I said to the buffalo, I said, you look very beautiful. And I walked away. I didn't pay him. I walked away. That was taken in Tesuque, New Mexico. One of my early photographs, I love this photograph, and it's never sold. It is a series called Indian Photographing, Tourists Photographing Sacred Sites. I remember pulling up in my VW bus, and I was dating Jody at the time, Hasselblad 500 CM. And right next to me was a carload of Germans. Every state park you go to, you're going to see Germans. And I started loading the film backs and getting them ready and getting out of the VW bus, and the Germans started laughing. And they go, oh. And I said, what's so funny? And they said, you're so funny. You're driving a Volkswagen, and you got a Hasselblad, and you're an Indian. Germans have such dead humor, you know. I just laughed with them. So, and I took that photograph, so that kind of reminds me of them. Grand Tetons. I wanted to trade Patrick Nagatani this image, and he didn't want to. It reminded him too much of Manzanar. They took Patrick's family down there and put him into Manzanar, a Japanese internment camp. So I said, I thought he'd like this one, Indian Photographing, Tourists Photographing Sacred Sites. And he looked at it for 5 minutes. He said, I don't want to trade. I said, why? And he told me. So I tell my students, you know, you respect things. And Savannah College of Art and Design, and you respect it because that camera is very powerful. And you go into areas like ruins, and you keep your mouth shut. And you pray. Here's Zig telling all these little rich white kids how to pray in the Indian way. And respect it. When you're out there by yourself, you lay something down. You say, thank you for letting me see this beautiful scenery. I got 2 kids going into I teach documentary, and I teach them about culture. I got 2 kids going into a mental institution that's been closed for 15 years, and they got spooked. I said, take some tobacco, pray to them. So when that happens, and burn that tobacco, let them know that you're there not to do anything, and tell them that as soon as that happens. And they do. And I said, this image here, I said, when you're in that area, I said, when you go in with their churches, you guys keep it, down, and you use their holy water and so forth. That's the same here. So, Indian photographing tours, photographing sacred sites. This is up in, where? This is up in, up in the Black Hills. This is in Lakota country. They gave the Black Hills to the Lakotas, and then they went ahead and took it back the next year. They said, as long as the water flows and the wind blows, this land will be yours forever. And the next year they discovered gold and moved them out into the plains. And then they put the heads up there, and they said, oh my God, we must commemorate them somehow. And they're putting up Chief Crazy Horse, who never had his photograph taken, by the way. But here he is here, and this is what the stone in the background looks like. This is his arm and the horse head. And Indian photographing tourists, photographing sacred sites. Here's an early photograph. You can buy anything now. You can buy dream catchers. And our sacred skulls are down there. You're not supposed to sell sacred skulls. And I photographed that. And he's hiding back there. And we're, into movies. And Pocahontas at that time was really popular. I love this photograph. These are Mormon elders. They're looking at rugs alongside the road. I thought that was really a good shot with the Mormon elders. We're turned into caricatures and spiritual caricatures. Here's 2 making out. I always tell everybody, this is how I make out. The lover. I tell everybody, this is how I'm built. So I said to her, what's your favorite image? And she said, this one. I said, well, I'm actually built that way. It's just common sense. It's just taking care of things. And you cut something down, you give something back. My father, he was a good hunter. And I've seen him kill deer, and he'd cut a piece of the deer and go over the hill, and he'd pray. And he'd give something back, and he'd always talk to the deer as he cut it. You're going to feed my family, and you're taking care of us, and stuff like that. It's just common sense, giving things back. Everybody thinks we have a nook into the spiritual. Everybody does. And all it is just common sense. You're out there, you pray, and so forth. Oh, I love this photograph. This is way up in Havre, Montana. I was following the Lewis and Clark Trail, and this guy was taking photographs of Native Americans, and I was taking photographs of him, taking photographs of Native Americans. And he was watching me, and he comes out, and he just comes right up there. He noticed me, and he came running fast. I said, uh-oh. And he said, who the hell are you, and what the hell are you doing? And I said, I'm taking pictures of you, taking pictures of Indians. He says, who the hell do you work for? I said, nobody, I'm just a photographer. He says, I'm going to kick your ass. And I said, no, you're not. And he stood about this high. And I said, don't get any closer, I'm going to knock you down. And he says, what do you do? And I said, I'm a professor. And I pulled out my card, and he looked at it, and he goes, oh, okay. I said, what are you doing out here? I said, taking pictures. He said, what do you think of Diane Arbus? So next thing you know, we're talking about Diane Arbus out in the middle of nowhere. So, I like this one. Hot dogs, cold drinks. So is it hot dogs and corn dogs and cold drinks? They just got done with the dance, and he's there. He goes, "I love your jingles." And she goes, "I love your feathers. I need something to drink." And they're there. It came to a series I did an undergraduate school at the University of New Mexico called Indian Photographing Tourists Photographing Indian. And I started photographing them because they were all over. And it wasn't out of spite. It was just something that you noticed. It wasn't intrusive, though it can be. And I would go to Native American gatherings and photograph tourists. So here's two ladies photographing. Here's up in Montana. She's on her knees, and this guy turned around, and she took a picture of them. This guy's up in Taos, New Mexico, and he's hiding, took a photograph. I tell my students, just because you got a camera doesn't mean you can shove it in anybody's face. That's a very powerful tool. And I send these kids all over, and I said, you respect culture. Talk to them. If you can't talk to them, make eye contact and point at your camera. If it's no, then you walk away. You're not meant to take that photograph. Have respect with it. And it's a very powerful tool. So tribal people didn't invent it. It was invented, and you just got to respect it. And this image, this body of work really went, and everybody collects it from, it just made me, so. Take a picture of the Indian and take a picture with the Indian. This is in Cherokee, North Carolina. I was traveling through, and you talk about the Indian removal, and Andrew Jackson then, the Indian removal and removing all the Indians out in the east and putting them in Indian territory in Oklahoma. He pulled the Cherokees out, and a little band of Cherokees, Solly's group, went up into the Great Smoky Mountains and hid out, and cavalry couldn't get them. You got Indians living in Florida, the Seminoles, they ran into the Everglades, and the government couldn't get back in there and get them. So that's why you got Seminoles in Florida and Cherokees in North Carolina. I remember I first heard about chiefing when I was going to school in northeastern Oklahoma State in Tahlequah. I went to school with Jim Thorpe's daughters, Grace and Gail. And they said, we just came back from Cherokee, North Carolina, and man, are they doing chiefing out there. So I was driving through, and I saw this guy out, and Cherokees never used to wear feathered headdresses or breastplates, bone breastplates. So I stopped, and I talked to him, and I said, you don't mind if I hang out with you and take pictures? And he just shrugged his shoulders. And he wouldn't say anything to me, so I hung out. And people would come by, and they'd say, oh my God, it's an Indian chief. And people would take photographs. And I remember this white lady came by, and she had her two kids. And one was a girl and a boy, and she goes, oh my God, it's an Indian chief. Come on, sit on the Indian chief's lap. And the little girl wouldn't go. And she was cowering behind her mom's leg. And she was, come on, you can go with the Indian chief. And I was so embarrassed. I put my head down, and I had a huge lump in my throat. And he wouldn't look at me, and I wouldn't look at him. And I look up, and he sat down, and the little boy got on. She goes, oh, that's just beautiful. And she took a picture. And she dropped some money in the basket, and she walked off. And he went over there by himself and stood and looking up into the mountains. And I got up and turned the other way and looked the other way. And finally, I said, I'm going to go. It was nice hanging out with you. And he said, you pay me. He said, this is how I make my living. I make my rents and my bills, and water bills. So I gave him $20. And I drove away, and I was thinking, oh my God, that bothered me. And I drove up into the Great Smoky Mountains, and I couldn't sleep in my van. And I woke up in the morning, and I thought, well, Zig, this is okay. That's what society did to the culture. This is the way it has to be. That's okay if he wants to do that, Zig. There's nothing wrong with that. Society made him that way. So they stand out in the street, Chief Red Hawk, my camera, your camera, or Chief Red Hawk's camera. And people come from all over just to, see their culture. I wish I had $1 for every time someone says I was Cherokee, or my great-grandmother was a full-blooded Cherokee princess. I'd be rich. But he'll get a little money, and his buddies will go out and get a little drink. That's all right. I photographed way out where all the westerns were shot, Mesa Verde. I photographed all the signs from Albuquerque to Flagstaff, made by Indians, and the whole guns, and the Indian houses with 20 dogs, and the teepee trading post. You sleep in a teepee out here, you get bit by a scorpion or a rattlesnake. They never had teepees. Well, they don't. The people, they say that nobody knows that. Visit the world's largest Indian reservation. All plastic money, okay. And then he's got these wooden teepees up here, and tourists love it. Tourists will stop by. Oh, why confuse us? Why confuse us? When you come by this sign, you'll see about 5 carloads of Indians, and they're going, what the heck? Where should we go, buffalo or bison?